Welcome back. My name is Markus Wesaw, and today I would like to do a toolbox talk on air purifying respirators, or what we call APR respirators for short. So my focus today will be on hygiene. And the reason I think this is important is throughout my site inspections, I consistently find APR respirators in use by people who really don't know how to keep them clean. So, as always, if you'd like to contact me directly about any of this, feel free to do so, as my contact information is on the screen. So let's go ahead and delve into this interesting subject matter. I'd like to begin with a brief introduction on respirators, just in case you don't have the background that you probably need to have if you're wearing respirators. So, generally speaking, we have two types of respirators. We have what we are talking about now, APR, or air purifying respirators, and we have another type called SAR respirators, or what we refer to as supplied air respirators. This is interesting because one serves to actually supply clean grade D air to the employee using the respirator, and the other, the APR specifically, is a type of respirator that just provides a filtration system. So the way I like to teach this in class is I ask all the participants in the class to think about a Brita water filter that you would put on your tap water. A lot of people are buying those these days, and they think it makes the water taste a little better, or maybe they're sensitive to the chlorine in regular tap water. Well, APR respirators do essentially the exact same thing. They have different methods of purifying the particulate or matter that's floating around in the air, but that's neither here nor there. For our purposes, what I want you to think about is I want you to think about an air purifying respirator as being a filtration system to take dirty air that we don't want to breathe, and we filter that out. We breathe in what is left over. Now, a supplied air respirator, again, think about an SCBA or self-contained breathing apparatus as one example. A lot of people don't realize this, but if you look at scuba gear that divers use, that's self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. So you can kind of have a fun fact there with that one. So think about a diver, and the diver's actually going underwater. There's no breathable air for human beings down there, so that's what the diver uses. We kind of supply that air to the diver so the diver can go and explore and do whatever work he or she needs to do. Now, a NIOSH N95 painter's dust mask is an excellent and very common example of an air purifying respirator. So you can see one of those if you haven't been exposed to that before. Most of you have, but in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a very good 3M brand N95 respirator. To the right bottom of your screen, you'll see a very good brand Scott, which manufactures a lot of self-contained breathing apparatus type respirators or supplied air. So I hope that gives you a good background on the difference, and that's very important to note, by the way, because there are certain conditions like in IDLH or immediately dangerous to life and health scenarios where you would not be allowed to use an APR respirator just because it's far too dangerous. If you've got questions on that, let me know. Let's go ahead and move on to our focus today, which is going to be on APR respirators. I plan on doing some more videos and more presentations on supplied air respirators, but more to come on that later. So I've pretty much come up with 3 simple objectives that I'd like to communicate to all of you today. The first is I'd like you to learn how to keep your APR respirator clean. It's very, very important to keep these things clean. And if you're diligent and you keep this in mind, it's easy to maintain your respirator in a safe working condition so you can use it over and over again for the most part. Secondly, I have another objective for you, and that is to learn to inspect your respirator monthly and prior to use. And I've put together kind of a video that I'm going to be embedding into this video about exactly how to do that and how to do a quick inspection on an APR respirator. So more to come on that in a few minutes. Thirdly, I'd like you to only use a respirator in accordance with the manufacturer's written recommendations. Whether it's 3M, Scott, North, MSA, doesn't matter. Each one of those manufacturers and all the rest of them are going to provide each respirator with written recommendations, and you can pull out a booklet or at least a double-sided sheet of paper with these recommendations on how to keep the respirator clean, how to use it, when not to use it, what's it good for, how often do we replace it. These are really common questions that a lot of people just ignore because they don't know. All right, so hope that resonates with you, and I hope you keep that in the back of your mind going forward, especially if you are an individual working with an APR respirator. Clean and store your respirator. So again, I want you to look at the manufacturer's written recommendations on how to clean your respirator. And the reason for this is not all manufacturers are exactly the same. Some are going to provide an actual procedure for how this is done. Others say, well, use the NIOSH procedure that they publish, and whatever they say, we're going to be good with. Okay. Usually, the manufacturers can provide, they're typically non-alcoholic towelettes. They look like the kind of towelettes that you would get at a restaurant after eating a bunch of chicken wings or barbecue ribs or something like that. But they could also look like an alcohol towelette. But we typically recommend the use of non-alcoholic towelettes to wipe away any collections from materials inside the mask. Sometimes it's just dust, but it's really hard to tell what's in it. That's why we always want to make sure it's clean. Okay. Then I'd like to provide a very awesome and unique way to store your respirator. I know that many manufacturers provide kind of a Ziploc baggy kind of deal to put your respirator into when you're done using it. But I think I'm going to provide you with a better alternative to that, something I've been using for years and years, and it's quite a good method. So you'll see a picture of a plastic Folgers coffee container on your screen there. And this Folgers container is excellent because you can fit a half-face respirator in it, and you can also put some of those towelettes in there. You can take a 3x5 note card and put an inspection record in there. Just jot it down whenever you inspect it monthly and put your initials there, and there you go. So this Folgers container has everything that you need. And I'm not trying to say, oh, Folgers is the only way to go here. If you're a Maxwell House type person, feel free to use your Maxwell House coffee container. I like Folgers, so that's what I put on here. And thank you, Folgers, by the way, for providing an excellent way to reuse plastic. Inspect your respirator. So I'd like you to check your respirator for some of these things. Now, this is not a comprehensive list. There's so much that I'd like you to learn and how to inspect your respirator properly. But for now, I'm going to go over the basics with you. So first, I want you to look at face piece problems like excessive dirt, cracks, tears, and inflexibility. The rubber part of your face piece should actually be quite flexible. You should be able to stretch it a little bit. It should have some give to it, kind of like a rubber band. And how a rubber band over time will get old and it'll crack and it gets harder and stiffer. Well, we don't want that with your respirator. So if you notice any of those kind of problems, you need to get rid of that respirator. Secondly, I want you to examine the head straps for breaks, twists, and broken buckles. Those are pretty important because you have to have a seal when you use an APR respirator. And if you have bad straps or your straps just aren't going to give you that consistent tension that you really need to hold that respirator in place, that can spell out a whole bunch of problems. So if you got bad head straps, we need to either replace those or just get another respirator altogether. Finally, I'd like you to Assess the exhalation and inhalation valves and covers for any defects. I'm going to show you how to do that. And when you look at how to do that, I think it might surprise you in how you approach looking and inspecting and cleaning your respirator in the future. So those are some really important things I'd like you to inspect if you're using an air purifying respirator. Manufacturer's recommendations. Always read the literature provided by the manufacturer for a number of reasons. Firstly, they will tell you how to keep your respirator clean. There are different procedures for this. Can I give you a general procedure on how to do this? Of course I can. But what am I going to do first? I'm always going to look at what the manufacturer says. I'm going to say, well, let's look at what they want to do and go from there. If there's something I don't agree with, or if there's an easier way to accomplish the same goal, we might look at that at that time. But in general, we're always going to look at those manufacturer's recommendations. Secondly, you need to know when to replace your respirator. Okay. Some of them have a clock face and an arrow with the 2 digits of the year ending. For example, if a respirator was made in January of 2009, we would see a 09 in the center with an arrow pointing to the 1 on that clock face. So some manufacturers may say replace this respirator annually or every 3 years, or when A, B, and C exist. Okay, for example, tears or inflexibility or something like that. Okay, these are just important things to keep track of, and the manufacturers really provide you with a very good running start on how to be safe and how to use a respirator in accordance with not only our established safety and health regulations, but also how the respirator itself was made to protect you, which is very, very important and I think often overlooked. I'd like to check out an actual APR respirator at this time, and I think it'd be important to go ahead and transition to that right now. And once we look at this, I think you'll understand more about what I'm getting at with all of this cleanliness and hygiene regarding APR respirators. So let's take a peek at the real world and let me show you a little bit about what I see on a continual, regular basis. So this is a respirator that I found someone actually using while they were painting, and the particular kind of paint that they were utilizing called for an organic vapor rated cartridge. As you can see here, this is NIOSH rated organic vapor, and you can see here we have an outer cartridge that is rated by NIOSH as a P100. So if you want to look inside this mask, you can see how dirty this is. Okay, the inside of your rubber mask should be kept very, very clean, and there should be no material or any kind of any kind of substance in there at all, especially dirt and possibly the chemical that you're using. So keep that in mind. Another thing I want to point out to you here is inside we have a couple of gaskets, and you can see one gasket there, and then you can see the other gasket there. Now look how those are deformed and don't really look very well. They're probably not doing their job. Now down here you can also see that the straps are looking pretty bad these days on this particular respirator. You can see that the elastic has been wearing out, okay, and you can see the exhalation valve. Actually, one of the valves just fell off. That was unexpected, but since it did, let me give you a quick example of how to inspect these type of valves. You can see how on a flat surface the valve or gasket here isn't entirely level. It's not concave, it's showing signs of wear and tear. That's not good. The exhalation valve that you see here, if you were to take this off, you would see an exhalation valve with a little stem on it. Now sometimes those can be concave and sometimes they're not. It depends on the maker or manufacturer of the respirator. So a couple of reminders about these respirators. All the cartridges and respirators that you're going to be using have to have this NIOSH rating. Okay, this is a North brand respirator, and North is pretty good. I recommend North or Scott, 3M, MSA. Those are all fine respirators, but you have to use these respirators in accordance with the known recommendations. So if you look at the written manufacturer's recommendations for this respirator, I guarantee you that North is going to say keep the respirator clean, and they're going to give you some recommendations on how to do that and how to store this respirator and how to generally take care of it, when to replace it, and a few other very good industry standards. So that will help you stay in compliance with OSHA to a degree. Now there's a lot of other things that we can cover, but today I just want to remind everyone to keep your respirators clean and never ever allow this much gunk or material to get in the respirator. I have seen cases where people wearing respirators like this air purifying mask here, where the individual is actually getting more exposure from the inside of the respirator than from the outside environment, which it sounds very crazy to say that, but it's absolutely true. Again, my name is Markus Wesaw. It has been a pleasure presenting on respirator, APR respirator, specifically Hygiene today. If you have any questions or like to contact me directly, the contact information is listed on the screen. And with that, I will see you next time, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.